British students are being taught to hate great historical figures of Britain. I'm going to give you in this video a few examples of that, but the latest example, the University of Leicester are teaching their students that Hitler was a better person than Margaret Thatcher, than Donald Trump, comparing Margaret Thatcher to Vladimir Putin. Once again, we are having young people indoctrinated that whilst Nazis are bad, Trump and Thatcher and the Conservatives are even worse. Hello everyone, this is Andre Walker. Thanks so much for viewing this video. Please do subscribe, but more importantly, hit the bell notification icon. It's the best way to absolutely guarantee you get all my videos as soon as they are released. Well, many of you will have seen the story about the University of Leicester. It was a little while ago and I didn't notice it, but I thought I'd tell you. Anyway, this was about the principles of management class at Leicester University, where presentation slides were showing that Margaret Thatcher and Donald Trump were autocrats, whereas Vladimir Putin and Hitler were similar but not quite as bad, which I find absolutely despicable. But the reason that I wanted to make this video is not necessarily about that piece of news. It's about all the derangement that we've seen now, because we did see that Google once removed a picture of Winston Churchill on the grounds he was a racist, but nonetheless kept Adolf Hitler. And I also think there is a grudging respect on the political left for Adolf Hitler because of his anti-Semitism. That's just a theory. When you saw Ken Livingstone, you always got the impression that Ken Livingstone loved and admired Hitler, but didn't want to, or found it quite difficult to admit that because he was officially on the far left. But nonetheless, I will say, even if they don't love Hitler, here's what they think. They think Nazism is gone. Therefore, the great threat now to them is freedom, democracy, free speech, rule of law. Those are the things that have to be smashed. The family. Look at the amount of money that has been put into the trans movement by the political left. And by the way, I want to say one thing about the trans movement, because people often ask me about this. First of all, as far as I'm concerned, run round in a frock and call yourself Susan if you want to. Even if you're not called Susan, you're not a woman. And the reason I say that is because you only live once. At the end of the day, Romans wore togas. The Georgians, men wore makeup and women didn't, which is not a bad idea actually, because they always thought, because men are all craggy faced, it was probably wise to make them wear makeup, whereas because women are hot, they don't. But my point is, you only live once, so get on with it. Obviously, putting men into women's prisons, well, these are people of bad character who lied. So actually, your average bloke walking around in a dress, I would suggest doesn't cause much of a problem. But what happens is, the way that the left have tried to create an argument between us and the trans lobby, tried to really ramp up the whole Israel thing, and really it's to cause hatred. And in the case of the trans lobby, they're absolutely desperate to smash the family, because like the Soviet Union discovered, there's no way that you can bring in socialism. There's no way that you can bring in authoritarianism. There's no way that you can destroy free speech as long as the family exists. And so all of these things that are perceived to be a threat are in fact the things that they attack. Did you notice? I thought I didn't have the mic on. So they will attack Churchill, they will attack Thatcher, they will attack the family. They're not bothered about Islamists because it's no threat to their project to take over Britain for socialism. They're not going to have a go at Adolf Hitler because it doesn't really matter. And what they'll do is they won't attack, as an example, President Xi of China. I mean, I found it extraordinary. They're pulling down Edward Colston, not a slave owner, pulling down his statue in Bristol and filming it on a phone made by a 9-year-old and going, isn't this disgusting? What's going on with slavery? In fact, actually, if you wanted to campaign against slavery, there's lots of things that you could do to campaign against it. Certainly, what's going on in Pakistan is a major problem. In the Middle East, they've always had slaves. And I will tell you something, in terms of modern slavery, we saw that example of the Romanian grooming gang in Dundee, which I talked about a little bit on another video. And what I'd say to you about that is, call it grooming if you want, it's slavery, right? It's what we used to call sexual slavery, but it's slavery nonetheless. When you go to the slave markets of Khartoum, they're selling Yazidi women. They're not selling them to be cooks. They're selling them to be, I shouldn't use the word prostitute, being enforced sex workers, indentured workers. And so it's happening in Britain, it's happening right across the world. And there are certainly more slaves now than there have ever been. But why attack the the slave owners of Virginia, because it's about, if you like, toxifying the reputation of white people. We've seen it in schools all the time, haven't we? Well, it's what I call the original sin. The original sin is if you are a white person, then you ought to be blamed for slavery, for colonialism, and all that sort of thing. And what we forget is that the settlements of Pakistan, the settlements of some various religious groups and ethnic groups around here, I mean the Roma Gypsies or whatever, those settlements are colonialism, aren't they? You know, immigration is colonialism, as far as I can see. It's about moving people lock, stock and barrel to take over a particular area. And I've got a very good, by the way, Pakistani friend who says to me, you're being a little bit unfair talking about tribal areas. And he said it's birds of a feather flock together. Well, that is correct. But that is a problem with integration, because what you're doing is you're trying to bring people over to Britain to be British. And in fact, you're ending up in a situation where you're creating Pakistan in Britain, which I just think is inherently damaging. And of course, that's not because I've got anything against Pakistan. In fact, I'll tell you, Pakistan supplied me with a very good dinner tonight. Thank you so much to Starkerai in Slough. Not an advert, I paid for it. So, where are we? Well, there's always this drip effect, isn't there? So if you look at the example of Winston Churchill and the Bengal famine, I don't know anybody who is Bengali who genuinely thinks that Winston Churchill was a bad person. He made some off-color remarks about people from India, which is India, Pakistan and Bangladesh, or modern day India, Pakistan and Bangladesh. But the Bengal famine was caused by a Japanese blockade. So we had a choice. You could either not attempt to feed the Bengalis, or you could attempt to feed them in the knowledge that all your boats would be sank. They wouldn't get fed either way, but now you'd lose your entire merchant navy. Similarly with Thatcher, you know, it's about saying that that those values, those principles are the enemy, that she is an autocrat, that she's dangerous. And to compare people to Vladimir Putin, I mean, the other thing that I find bizarre about Vladimir Putin is, you know, if I sat down with Vladimir Putin, I'd say to him, listen, if you don't knock it off now, Russia will run out of money for you to steal, right? And have you seen this new compound he's built? It's utterly ludicrous. And talking of presidential compounds, and I know I'm pulling a few things together here, but I like to have an omnibus every now and again of various ideas I've had over the past couple of days or weeks. I was amazed watching on the news about the new Trump ballroom at the White House. So people were literally saying, this is a violation of our traditions, our history. One of our buildings is being pulled down. No, no, no. Are you aware of this? The White House is one of the smallest presidential palaces in the world. You could fit 17 White Houses inside Buckingham Palace, which is extraordinary. It doesn't have a banqueting suite, so it's state banquets. They have to put a tent up in the garden. I bet you didn't know that. So fairly obviously spending 300 million on an absolutely brilliant banqueting hall so state visits can be properly organised is obviously a good thing. The East Wing isn't particularly old. It's not a part of the main building. Hey, by the way, you know, when I looked at the White House, I thought that bit on the front was where the Oval Office was, but obviously that's in the West Wing, away from it. But this East Wing is just an annex. But it does show you, doesn't it, that you look at Vladimir Putin. I personally believe a lot of what the Ukrainians did was unfair to the Russian minority in Ukraine. I do accept that, and I do think it's a battle over oligarchs. I do accept that, and I do accept that that ultimately Joe Biden, or rather Hunter Biden, wound up a lot what was going on in Ukraine. But can you imagine comparing a man who started a war that killed 1 million people and saying Putin's quite bad, but bloody hell, that Donald Trump, him and his new ballroom built at no taxpayers' expense, and Adolf Hitler, Adolf Hitler gassed 6 million Jews, but I'll tell you what, that bloody Margaret Thatcher, she's worse. She could be abrasive, you know. It's garbage. But what it actually does is it lessens the impact of some of the worst people in history. Because if you believe Hitler, Putin, Trump, Thatcher are all exactly the same, it makes you forget the very serious crimes that have been committed by these people. The war crimes of Vladimir Putin. One of them, by the way, is sending his troops in completely ill-prepared for that battle. They panicked, and that's why a lot of the really bad violence took place. You know, we get it all the time at the United Nations. You are a fascist. Well, actually, fascism has caused very serious problems in the world. Communism has caused very serious problems in the world, but we don't care about that, because what happens is it's like a seesaw. If you say that Margaret Thatcher and Hitler are as bad as each other, yes, you damage the reputation of Margaret Thatcher, but you also improve the reputation of Adolf Hitler, and you get to an equilibrium. And so then you're starting to say that the economic changes, monetarism, even the miners' strike, was as bad as gassing 6 million people, which then it's not Holocaust denial, but it puts it in the completely wrong direction. Shame on these people who are doing this. And the other thing that I'd make as a final point is this. You can't teach everything in history lessons. It's not possible for every child in Britain to know everything. And so when you start selling this garbage to the public, you know, sometimes it can resonate. And in Britain, particularly when you talk about Hitler and Thatcher, we are incredibly proud of the way that we stood up to Nazism. Most children believe that we fought the Second World War to stop the Holocaust. Of course, the Second World War started in 1939. The Holocaust started in 1941. But there's this sense in Britain that the Nazis were racist and we beat them. If you say that actually Hitler wasn't that bad, we're all racist and the war's irrelevant, actually, that commitment to anti-racism, which was so imbued in Britain from the Second World War, disappears and racism becomes more prevalent. That's my thoughts. Please do subscribe below, and please do comment, by the way. I do read them, and I often reply to the people that said, are you sponsored by Crew Clothing? I just wanted to say they had a sale on. Until next time, why did I say that? Goodbye.